Good afternoon and welcome to Awakened Wellness. This is a great show for those of you that haven't followed us before to learn about where your self-discovery meets purposeful, lasting change. And my co-host Marie is here, and we're going to dive right in. We have last week's show, or last month's show, I should say, and I hear you've been getting quite a bit of feedback and interest.
Yes, on It Is What It Is.
It is what it is.
That caused a lot of feedback. I was surprised at how much people resonated with it, and it really made a difference for them. My first one is, and it's a friend of mine, her name is Pat, and I'm giving her a shout out, Pat. Hi, Pat. Yep. She talked about how she heard that phrase 1,000 times, but now gets the meaning of it. That things, when you tell the story, it stops you from seeing what's really happening. And then if you just get to the nuts and bolts of it, you can make more change. It's made her look at things very differently, and it's made her think of things in a more simple way versus this whole drama thing attached to whatever's happening.
Overcomplicating, overthinking.
Yeah, so she really liked it. Someone else, again, that same show, they resonated it and could not believe how simple the things are if you get rid of the story and just deal with the problem at hand or the situation at hand. They never knew they had a story. So now they're seeing themselves telling this whole tale, realizing, well, if I just do this, I'd be out of it and be done with it. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of cool. So now they're trying to catch it. But they say a lot of times when they're in the throes of it, they realize they start telling a story about something and then they just can't stop. But then they realize the story doesn't even have anything to do with it, that they're just assuming, or it could be, or it might have been, and that kind of thing. But they haven't stopped it yet, but they're watching themselves do it. And that's the key, is to just first realize you're doing it.
Well, if you can't identify, you can't do anything about it.
Right.
So, wow, that's a biggie.
Now,
I'm pretty impressed about that one.
They said it felt cold and emotionless if they don't have a story for everything that's happening. Because it's a big part of people's lives, right?
Okay.
Yeah. They did not understand my point in any of it. And they said, so my advice to them is become the observer of yourself and listen when you're talking to somebody about something that happened to you. And see if you've already resolved the issue. If not, are you just going on about the problem and you have a story and you're either a victim or you think you can't handle it or you don't know what to do, versus just diving in on what can I do to correct this. But start watching yourself to see. It's not that you become emotionless. It's just that you simplify things a little bit so you can handle more things and have more information funnel through you on how to correct it.
That's quite a bit. Those are very opposite comments. Both.
It's because everybody sees life differently. And that's the fun part about it, because we think everybody thinks the same. And that's why we think we can all get into a room and make the decision, but we can't because everybody's coming from a different place.
Right.
And they're hearing the same information, but they're interpreting it differently in accordance to how they grew up, what they think life is, decisions they've made along the way. Education, non-education, jobs, experiences, all those things come into play.
It all matters.
It all matters on who's sitting next to you and why you think one thing and they think the other. Neither one of you is right or wrong because you're both making it from the same place. But we seem to think that there's one right.
That's very true. That actually happened this morning. Now that you mention it, I'm
so that's why sometimes like in a business or even in the government, there has to be certain things that benefit, like in medicine, it benefits the masses, not every individual, because you'll never be able to benefit it's impossible.
Correct.
There always has to be a constant that this keeps civility or this keeps us safe or this,
Okay.
Yeah.
And it is not emotionless, but you do want to take the drama out of it. You do want to take the...
Right. Because the interpretations of the situations aren't even what's really happening. It just is what it is, what's happening. So as soon as you put all your interpretations on it, you start to cripple yourself sometimes, and you can't get out of the situation.
We need to stop spinning things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very interesting. Wow. So are we ready to dive in today's show?
Sure.
Living the dream.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what this one's all about. You never know with this one.
It's funny because everybody asks me how I'm doing every day, and I just say, oh, living the dream. You always say that. And I explain to them because we're all living in our own dream state. Again, according to how you see life, my interpretation of life is different than yours. And I can change it at any time if I choose to see my interpretation is just an interpretation. It's not completely what life is.
Correct. It's not sealed and stamped, and that's
and everybody thinks it's sealed and stamped. So the goal is to start seeing that you create your life according to what you've learned and how you've interpreted that information. But it's not necessarily what's really happening.
Okay.
And that's why most of us struggle, because we can't get beyond that.
So it's almost limiting. We're limiting ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we can only identify or understand this far because of whatever we've limited ourselves with. So we can't take that next step. You can't see over the fence, whatever that phrasing is you want to use.
It's kind of like people in family situations, okay? All the kids supposedly grew up in the same house, which they did not, because every time you add a kid, the dynamics change. But you put them all in a room, it was a completely different house they all grew up in. But they all grew up under the same situation.
Correct.
But not one of them interpreted it the same. So, yeah.
Wow. That just happened yesterday. You're just like dredging up all these, oh my gosh, I just dealt with that yesterday.
So the more we can see that everybody's in their own little dream or created reality, and that we get to step out of that and say how much of that really is what happened or what we interpreted it to be.
Right. What's truth, what is fiction, and not being rude about calling it fiction.
Right.
It's your story.
No, it's because that's, it's the only tools you had at the time to interpret it. That's all you got.
That's true.
You don't know what you don't know. But then once you know more, you can add to your dream or your story and make it bigger all the time and start finding clarity in all these areas that you think you were wronged, but all along that person was stressed and overwhelmed and didn't even know that you were standing next to them when they dissed you or whatever it was.
Right.
But you interpreted it this way where they didn't even know because they were overwhelmed. Yeah.
And it makes you think, how many times did you pre-think, presuppose the outcome of a situation, simple or otherwise, only to find out you were completely wrong? I've done that a couple of times and said,
all the time.
You weren't thinking that? No.
Yeah.
Really? You weren't thinking that?
Yeah.
I'm sure you were thinking that. No, you weren't. I've done that a couple of times, and that's a hard.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And we all live in our own little world that we've created, but no two people live in that same world.
No, we don't, do we?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
No. So when they say walk in my shoes, you really can't.
But if you tried, you'd start to see that person from a different perspective because you think they know why they're thinking already. But you don't, because you haven't come up through their ranks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, all these phrases have just really great meanings and applications that we thought were just cute little
So
sayings.
let's take it from an awakened wellness standpoint, because that's what we're discussing here.
Yeah.
Okay. So medicine as a whole and self-healing. How do you interpret that? There's a very narrow scope out there. Even if you go alternative versus the Western model versus the self-healing model, everybody has themselves in little pockets of what can or can't happen. What if it all happened together? What if you could mix them all and use them accordingly to make them all work for you?
That would be nice.
Accordingly, and even add yourself into that. But we're so pocketed in how we see things that we have to awaken to the point that we realize that every story, the Western model is so etched and they're dividing the body up into a million pieces that they've lost their way. The alternative is divided everything at a cellular level and this and that. So they're missing the boat. Then you take the self-healing piece and it's taken too much angle of the soul and all of that stuff. But if you start mixing them all.
Finding the right balance. The right recipe.
And
what a wonderful world it would be.
You could create your own dream that way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way to do that is to ask yourself, how do you see and use the medicine that you choose? Do you see it as the one and only. That's all there is.
Or are you willing to say,
Yeah.
what could I add to that?
And I think in today's world, because of what's happening in medicine, more people are waking up to want to see more.
Yeah.
Because they're realizing when they go to the doctor, it's very limited. It's very limited.
And there's no wiggle room. There's actually not a lot of room for how you feel about it, whether it's something you could do or it's possible to do. Is there another way? Can you add something to it? It is pretty black and white.
Right.
So that means you actually have to be open to listen.
You have to be open to listen, and you have to want to change where you're at. All right. So when you look at healing from an awakened wellness, you have to look at where your beliefs on what work is. Is it a 9 to 5? Is it, we have so many young kids coming up now looking at work very different than what their parents looked at, right? And some of the work models are changing according to that. Is it working or isn't it? And there's such a diversity of what is correct and what isn't. So again, we have to all learn, if I'm stuck in it's only this, do I have to open up to realize I could create more for myself and have a different situation and how it works?
That means we have an awful lot of options truly available to
We
us.
do.
And some decision
We
making.
do, and that's the whole goal. Yeah.
Is not to be limited to the point where you can't move right, left, up, or down. We have to be able to see those options and choose, do I want to step forward? Do I want to step right? Do I want to step left? Do I want to take a half step?
And the key to that, is when you start to awaken, you start to realize, I have these options. Then all of a sudden, because everything's changing in the world now because of all the different changes that have happened, say, in the last 20 years, the marketing companies are doubling down on us being insecure and not knowing what we like or don't like. So now we're going sucked into all the quick fixes and all those things because we're still not confident enough in ourselves of what we want. So we're waking up, but we're still confused.
But
Because we want more, but then we're diving into all these quick fixes to get the more versus going back inside ourselves.
and saying, wait a minute, what do I really need?
So
what is really going to
every
make that
time you make a
difference?
choice, you have to ask yourself, what dream do I live in right now? What do I want my future to look like? And the choices I'm making now, are they getting me there? Or are they pushing me further away? So every time you dive into a quick fix, you're losing more of you because you're believing this story that this is going to happen in 6 to 8 weeks or 10 days or whatever it is. So you're losing a piece of you. So how is your aging looking as you lose you? You're losing
a little shaky.
You're losing control of you. Yeah, so you're creating a whole different scenario for yourself because every choice you make brings you to a different level of how you see life and in your dreams.
Which is farther away from you.
Well, not always. Some of us make choices that bring us closer.
Well,
to
yeah,
us.
but I mean, if you're going with that
Right,
media
but you
and
have to
advertising,
realize that the more you open yourself and ask all these questions, the more vulnerable you're going to become because your foundation is shaking.
but asking and inquiring is not a bad thing either. But you need to understand that you want to make sure your foundation is solid.
You should have a goal set in mind. What does aging look like to me? And the goals I want are going to define that path.
Okay.
Right? You have to be careful. So it can be anything like that. How do I say it? You have to be very discerning on what you want for yourself because the ego will always take over. It's just easier.
Okay.
So that's why asking to see what you need to see is really important so you can always stay on that path of creating what you want for yourself.
Wow, this just gets deeper and deeper and more complicated. But it's not actually complicated if you stay true to yourself and you really
It's all
stick with
about
that
staying
foundation.
true to yourself. What do I need for me? And when I make a choice, is it taking me further away? And am I believing someone else's story? Or am I listening to what my body needs, what I know I need for my life? And how is it going to complement my life? Because I'm creating my own dream and building on my foundation. As my foundation rocks, because I realize now there's more than one way to make tacos, I'm not going to go out and buy 20 different variations. When I get into the store, I'm going to get overwhelmed.
Correct.
So if I'm trying to eat better, maybe I want to make a fish one today. I didn't know you could have a fish taco. And now I want to make that. And then you just start building on that.
All right. Instead of jumping in with both feet, just kind
Right.
of test the waters and try one thing at a time, not the whole enchilada.
Right. And it's just more about realizing that everything you know is yours specifically. And that not everybody has your answer, that you're the one that's got to have your answer, because they're building the answers based on their knowledge base, not yours.
And that's not necessary, and that's not your knowledge base.
No.
So that's, yeah. I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Ooh, so it also says to me, slow down a little bit too.
You have to slow down. You have to slow down to realize what dream you're creating for yourself.
Otherwise, you're going to create a dream and then have to recreate a dream and then recreate another dream.
Well, we do wake up every day.
Yeah.
We do, some of us. If you're repeating history every day and your life's at a standstill and you're not happy, you have to look at it. So when I say living the dream, you're living in what you believe life to be right now.
Correct. Not that you're in this perfect, harmonious world and everything's wonderful, which is their interpretation of your comment.
No, you're living
the dream
in what
of your day.
You interpret life to be at this point. Where do you want that to go?
Yep.
And how are you making choices to make it go in that direction? But you get to see how, as you evolve, you get to see how misguided you are because you really think that's life.
Yeah.
You truly think that's life. And we've seen a lot of that breakdown in society now, that we thought, the husband had control over the wife, right? Or, all these different aspects of...
that are really not true.
Well, they're not, but and some people still live it and believe it, and that's their dream, because that's, either their religion tells them to, or their nationality tells them to, or whatever it is that they believe that that's how life works. And you can't budge that.
No, that's something that they have to change. That's something they have to discover and change.
But all these things are breaking down now, which makes us more vulnerable. So we have to be more aware that they're breaking down and that we were living in a created reality. Where are we going next? And what do we want for ourselves? Because the marketers are doubling down on it. They know. They know that we are floundering.
We're grasping at straws. We're grasping at that ring and hoping that this is going to be the next fix-it, the next best thing.
And it's not just that. It's the media. It's all kinds of things. I mean, people are getting sucked in to believe things that aren't true because they're vulnerable, because they don't know where their anchor lies anymore.
Interesting. There was a program on just before I came, and they were talking about the realities in schools and children and diagnoses, and how quick parents are to run to the doctor and immediately, this one's depressed and this one's this and this one's that. And it was really sad to listen to it. But it was the first time I had heard in a little while that somebody said, you can have a bad day and you need to learn from that. That it's not the worst thing. You don't have to take a pill for it. So I was pleasantly surprised by somebody that just didn't run to this hardcore answer. And it was like a breath of fresh air. So every once in a while they have a little tidbit.
Yeah, and when it comes to kids, you got to keep them busy, but you got to do it in a way that you're involved in it. Not just throw them in a sport and let it go.
Right.
Yeah.
Throw them in front of the TV. Throw them in front
these
of a
kids
screen.
don't have a level of creativity anymore, and that soothes the soul big time.
Yeah.
If kids are creating and learning and growing, but parents are so stressed, the kids are stuck to the computers or whatever. It's thinking for them, so they're not problem solving, they're not thinking. Even adults aren't problem solving and thinking, and they get depressed because life is about being present and being involved in it, not just having it play out in front of you on some sort of screen, because you become very detached from life after that, and then you have no meaning. And if you don't have a meaning, I'll say to some people sometimes when they're having a bad day, because I have some clients that have some means, I say, go home and clean your house. I don't clean my own house. I go, you'll feel better. You'll feel better.
Yep.
Because you're doing something your body's designed to do.
Yeah, go do something. Use your body.
But when your housekeeping's done or your cooking's done, you're sitting there going, what do I do when I'm bored? And none of it has an accomplishment to it, a good feeling to it that I did this and this is my piece. You know, or you're somebody who's working so hard on the opposite end of the spectrum, you can't accomplish those things. So then you get overwhelmed again. So that's when you take a small piece and you make a nice spot somewhere in your house. You can just go sit and go, okay, I'm okay. Now I can handle this and add that onto my space.
Yep. Yep. It's not a bad thing to clean your house. It's not a bad thing to strip all the... My favorite thing, in full disclosure, is I love every couple of weeks to take every bed, strip it, put it in this giant bag that I have and go to the laundromat.
Wow.
And find the 2 biggest washers I can, divide them up, colors and whites, and just to sit there with a cup of coffee, because it's like 25 minutes, that's it. Take them out and hang them outside to dry.
Wow.
That feels like a huge accomplishment to me.
And if that's purposeful to you, that is huge.
Yep, it comes in all sorts of packages. You never know.
Exactly. So you're creating a dream that serves you, and that is mindfulness. That's mindfulness in a nutshell. That you're doing what quiets you, what calms you, and what gets you to the next step to create a better future for you, not getting caught in the treadmill of life all the time.
Right. I mean, I don't want to do 7 loads of laundry and then hang it out. I can go do it in 25 minutes, have a cup of coffee,
That's a great
and hang it
idea.
out. So, you can still do something, work, do a chore, but you don't have to do it where it takes up every minute of your day.
Right. So the goal is, think about what your dream state is. What do you live in? How do you see life? What interpretation do you have of how life works? And then talk to people. See how they see it. Ask them a bunch of questions to see if you think the same way, if you interpret your religion the same way. Not that you both know you go to church and you both pray.
Right.
How do you interpret what you're doing? And start learning. And start learning where you can kind of shift a little bit to broaden where you have to improve the quality of life, to age gracefully, to understand more what's happening around you, to catch those things now that are dragging you in that you didn't know because you believe certain things are just the way they are and they're limiting you. So start creating a bigger dream for yourself that has more openings and more availability.
Nice.
So when you're sitting in front of people and you ask questions, it's kind of cool versus talking. People just talk.
Right.
Because they want to talk about themselves. They want to tell you what's going on. They want to give you their opinion. Ask questions instead, and it's pretty darn fascinating to realize how people actually think.
Right, which is asking questions is listening, because if you're not listening, people just drone on as you would yourself. But I think that's a really good point. Have a couple of questions, pointed questions, pertinent to what they're talking about, and see where that goes, because that also shows that you're listening to that person. And then they actually have to think a little bit of how they're going to answer you back or question themselves,
right?
Which they might not do if they're always constantly telling the story.
And I do it as simple as at the grocery store. Like I bring the weirdest vegetables through the thing, and dandelion's one of my favorite. I grew up eating it and stuff like that. So the cashier's always looking at it kind of funny. They can never find the codes. And I'll say, what, you don't eat dandelion? I don't even know what it is. I go, do you want to know what it is? Well, kinda. And then the conversation keeps going. Oh, well, maybe I'll try it in some soup or something. And instead of just saying, oh, she doesn't know my code again, just open. And now I learned from her realizing how they grew up and they'd never seen anything like that. And it's just kind of cool to have fun talking to people back and forth, to learning how different they think than me and what I can learn from them.
And that in a grocery store at the checkout line.
It's fun because I was a cashier in a grocery store, and when people are mean to you, you're doing the best you can. So I just have conversations.
Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like paper or plastic, and I'm like, I have my own bag, thank you. And so many people just stand there silent. And I mean, it sounds silly, but how many people just stand there and stare at the cashier like they're supposed to figure it out?
Yep.
So, yeah, you have to have a little bit of fun. I like that. I'm going to try that. I'm going to pick a weird vegetable and see if the person I know when I go through them.
Like I said, they're people too. They're people too. Hardworking people too. Like I said, I was one of them for a long time.
Everybody is human. Everybody needs to be treated kindly.
Create more dreaming for yourself. Open up. Start living the dream. So live your dream, but live the dream, meaning you're bringing more into your life. You're improving on your life. you're creating a bigger dream for yourself.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, that was a fabulous show. Living the dream, what does it really mean? Don't get limited in what that phrase was that we thought it meant, that I thought it meant at the beginning.
It's all about creating.
Living and creating the dream.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me, Miss Marie. And I can't wait to do our next show. So I don't want to say pay attention, but look forward to the next show. It's going to be decisions. And don't forget, as always, where can they reach you to give you their feedback?
bodywithincommunity@gmail.com.
I love it.
Or marienodig.com.
Or marienodig with a K. All right. So we will see you at the next show. Thank you for joining us and have yourself a wonderful day.